Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the Volunteer Florida Foundation Finance PER training for the Florida Disaster Fund grants. I'm Tracy Lambright. I am the Deputy Finance Director here at Volunteer Florida, and with me today is Janelle Jones. She is the financial analyst that is tasked with overseeing the FDF grants. Today, we'll be going over a lot of information. I hope you will find it to be helpful and be a helpful resource for the future in managing the finance portion of this grant. Today's objectives will be understanding your grant and grant requirements, understanding what a cost reimbursement grant is, the match requirements. We'll go over the budget revision process as well as the advance process. What is the periodic expense report form, as you'll hear us refer to it as PER? How, when, and where to submit those monthly PER forms. We will also give you an understanding of what the required supporting documentation will be when submitting those monthly invoices and have a walkthrough of Laserfish. All right, so this grant will run from December 1st, 2025 to November 30th, 2026. I know several of you, I'm still working on getting budgets approved, and once those are approved, you will get those contracts, and then we'll get things moving. The grant expenditures and match expenditures incurred before the start of the grant period or after the end of the grant period are not allowable and will not be accepted. Expenditures or match expenditures incurred before the end of the grant period, but that are paid after the end of the period will be considered allowable if they are in your approved budget and have proper supporting documentation. And again, we will go over documentation later in the presentation. So quickly, keys to contract compliance. Make sure that you are reading your entire contract. Make sure that you not only know and understand the requirements of this grant, but that you know and understand the intended purpose of the awarded grant, what your approved project is, what expenditures are actually budgeted for in your approved budget for your project, the required reporting requirements, and important due dates. You must also follow all applicable federal and state administrative and audit requirements, as well as applicable Florida statutes and current policies of the state of Florida. You must also maintain all grant project records for a period of 5 years after the end of the fiscal year in which this grant agreement is finalized, or after an audit has been finalized per the Florida statutes on records retention. Meeting contract compliance is necessary to be successful. All required documentation must be on file with Volunteer Florida Foundation before any advances and reimbursements can be issued. This includes having an approved budget, a signed contract, a W-9 and confirmed EFT details, most recent audit report, and any other forms that were required by your contract. So why would you want to comply? There are consequences to noncompliance, just like any other grant. Not adhering to regulations and requirements can lead to audit findings, payback of funds for unallowable costs, not being reimbursed for expenditures due to insufficient documentation or calculations, delays in receiving reimbursements, decreases in funds due to not meeting match requirements, and a forfeiture of reimbursements. So as you can see, it is very important for you and anyone else managing this grant within your organization to have an understanding of these grant requirements and ensure that your organization is complying with them. All right, so let's now discuss cost reimbursement. Most of you have heard this before. This contract with Volunteer Florida Foundation is a cost reimbursement contract. Cost reimbursement contracts require expenditures to first be paid for prior to requesting reimbursement of those expenses. This means that your organizations will be responsible for submitting a monthly invoice to the Volunteer Florida Foundation to request reimbursement for expenditures that have been paid for during that month. Under the cost reimbursement definition, costs are considered to be paid when, number one, if the expense was paid by check, it's considered to be paid when the check clears the bank. Number two, if paid by credit card, then it's considered to be paid when the credit card payment is paid and clears the bank. And number 3, if paid by ACH or an EFT, then it is considered to be paid when the charge clears the bank. All right, so let's take a moment to go over some examples to determine whether these expenses would be allowable on the December 2025 invoice based on this cost reimbursement definition. So number 1, warehouse rent was paid December 1st for the coverage period of December 1st through December 31st, 2025, and the check cleared the bank on December 18th. Applying the cost reimbursement definition, then yes, this expenditure would be able to be claimed on your December invoice. Number 2, warehouse rent was paid on December 15th for the coverage period of December 15th, 25 to January 15th, 26, and the check cleared the bank on January 4th. So in this example, no, since the payment cleared the bank on January 4th, the paid date would be January 4th, and this expense would have to go on a January invoice. Number 3, salary was paid on December 5th for time worked November 17th through November 30th, 2025, and cleared the bank on December 5th. So this would be no, because the dates that were worked were before the contract date started. All right, number 4, salary was paid January 2nd for time worked December 15th through the 28th, 2025. So again, this would not be allowable on the December invoice because it was paid in January. So that salary expense would be paid on or be put on your January invoice. Number 5, a roofing contractor was paid by check on December 15th to begin work, and the check cleared the bank the same day. So this one would be a yes. That would be an allowable cost for the December invoice. Number 6, equipment was purchased on December 28th with a credit card, and the credit card was paid for on January 28th by ACH and then cleared the bank on February 1st. So here, ultimately, the final payment was made when it cleared the bank on February the 1st. So this would not be an allowable expenditure on December or January, but it could be put on your February invoice. Number 7, couches and mattresses were purchased on December 4th with a credit card, and the credit card was paid on December 30th with a check and cleared on January 8th. Again, that date of payment would be considered January 8th, so this would not be allowable on December, but allowable in January. Number 8, roofing materials were purchased November 25 on a Home Depot credit card and will be used for your approved grant project. The expenses were paid for on December 23rd, 2025 with cash at Home Depot. So this would not be an allowable expense because the materials were actually purchased before the grant and contract began. So these would not be an allowable on any invoice. And number 9, volunteers assisting with the approved project served hours between the dates of November 15th through December 31st. So in this instance, only the hours that were served from December 1 to December 31st would be allowable because those were the dates that fell within the contract period. So any hours that were served from November 15th to November 30th would not be allowable. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So I hope those examples were helpful in helping you to determine what month that you can claim expenses on based on that paid date under the cost reimbursement definition. All right, we're going to go over the quick cost reimbursement process. So as I stated earlier, you're going to be submitting monthly invoices requesting reimbursement of grant funds for the expenditures that you have paid for during the month. Once those invoices are received, they will be reviewed by the VF Finance staff. If further documentation or information is required, a follow-up email request will be sent to you for response. This may also include requests for match expenditures. Per the contract, we have 40 days from the receipt of a correct and accurate invoice to provide payment. If we have to reach out for further information and documentation, your payments can and will be delayed. In the cost reimbursement process, if we do reach out to you for further information, we will give you 5 calendar days to submit those revisions back to us. If those revisions are not received within the 5 calendar days, we will revise the invoice based on the costs that we deem allowable based on the supporting documentation, and we will issue only payment for those expenditures. If there is an expense that you believe we should have additional justification or information for, or you feel like, you know, you want to explain the purchase to us, please include that information in your invoice submission. In this situation, more documentation provided is the better. It will allow us to, during the initial review, have the most information we need in getting those approved. All right, match is a requirement as grant is required at 50%, which most of you should already know that. Grantees are allowed to use cash or in-kind expenditures to match the grant, and the expenditures must also be in your approved budget. Using state or federal funds is only allowable if those funders are aware that you'll be using the funds to match this grant and that they approve of it. If anyone is using either of those types of funds to match the grant, we will require a copy of that approval letter. Volunteer hours are also allowed to be used to match this grant using the Florida Independent Sector rate of $33 per hour. The volunteer hours must be served and be in line with the approved project and of course be in the approved budget. Keep in mind that supporting documentation will also be required before the hours will be allowable. The documentation provided must include the name of the volunteer, dates and times of the volunteer hours served, a description of the volunteer activities, and also should be certified with a signature. Remember that the concept of matching is that the subgrantee is basically saying to the grantor, Volunteer Florida, that we give you $1 towards this cause. You're promising that you will solicit and receive additional funding to match some or all of that $1 for the same cause. So it is not enough for the subgrantee to only show proof that they received a cash donation of grant funds. The subgrantee must show proof that they spent the donation in furthering the mission of the grant in support of the approved project in one or more of the PER sections. And again, that must already be in your approved budget. You must also provide the same documentation as you would for all the reimbursable expenditures. And again, we'll still be talking about that in just a few moments. And a quick note that if you do not meet your required 50% match of the funds expended, your FDF funds will be decreased so that that match is met. So this slide is just a reminder of some of the unallowable costs for your reference. This is not an exhaustive list. So if you have any questions on whether an expenditure is allowable or not, and it is not listed, please reach out to us. Remember, if an expenditure is not already in your approved budget, it is considered an unallowable expense. So expenditures, again, that are not in your approved budget, and this includes for match as well. Any expenditures not associated with the approved project. Any meals or mileage reimbursed over the state of Florida per diem and mileage rates. Food or beverages, entertainment, snacks, candy, water, flowers, decorations are all unallowable costs. Trainings that do not directly relate to the scope of your project and benefit disaster recovery. Any state of Florida sales tax. Any staff time or benefits without proper documentation of time and effort allocated to the grant. And gift cards and incentives. Again, that is not an exhaustive list, so if you ever have a question on whether something is allowable or not, please make sure you're reaching out to us first. All right, we're going to talk about real quick about budget analysis. And this will move us, transition us into budget revisions. We are suggesting that you review your budget to actual expenditures regularly to avoid overruns or shortfalls. It ensures your compliance with grant terms and conditions and helps eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. In doing this, it can significantly help your organization identify expenditures and costs not budgeted and ensures that you have the capacity to carry out your approved project. This also will help you ensure that you're meeting your required match percentage throughout the year. So again, you may find during the year that you want to complete a budget revision to add, remove, or even move funds around to better serve your project needs. If you determine that you need to do a budget revision to better serve your program, you will need to complete a budget revision request form and submit it for approval. If you're wanting to add a line or expense or expenses that are not already in the approved budget, you must complete a budget revision request form and have it approved prior to purchasing any new items or including any new expenditures. If the line or expense is already in the approved budget, but the cost does not exceed 10% of your total budget, a revision may not be necessary. So let's talk about that. This 10% rule is what we call that. So again, if you're adding a line or expense that is not already in the budget, you must complete a budget revision request form and have it approved. However, if your line or expense is already in your approved budget, but the amount that you're basically overspending does not exceed 10% or less than the total budget, then you would not complete a revision. So the 10% rule refers to if adjustments are needed to the already approved budgets and don't exceed it. For example, let's say your total budget is $150,000 and you say $35,000 for mattresses is in your approved budget, but your actual cost was $42,000. This is a difference of $7,000. Since the difference is less than 10% of the total budget, you would not have to complete a budget revision in this case. Again, this does not change your budget amounts in any budget category. It would just show that you overspent the already approved line item by that amount under the 10% threshold allowable. This would mean that ultimately you will need to underspend in another category to cover those unspent items. So another quick example. Now let's say a month later you notice you didn't budget enough for the roofing contractor. And instead of $26,000 that was budgeted, it is now costing you $35,000. That is now a difference of $9,000. Cumulatively, you are now over the 10% threshold by $1,000, so you will now be required to submit a budget revision to move those funds. Adding a line item to the budget that is not already there is not included in the 10% rule. So just remember, if you're adding something that's not there, a revision is required. If it's already there and it's less than 10% cumulatively, you do not have to complete a budget revision. This is the budget revision request form. This is one of the exhibits in your contract package. You will use this for all budget revision requests. And the yellow highlighted areas, that's where you'll fill out your agency program name, the date you're submitting the revision, and the down at the bottom where you will sign off and provide the date you sent it to us. The original budget columns will be where you enter your original budget. That will come from your contract package. The budget changes columns is where you will increase and decrease your budget based on those updates that you're wanting to do. Remember that in a budget revision, we're not decreasing your funding and we're not increasing your funding. You're just moving the funds around within the categories already provided to better serve your project. So the budget changes section should equal 0. Your increases should equal your decreases. And then your revised budget columns will automatically calculate the new revised budget for you. And once approved, you will be able to start using and purchasing those new expenditures. The justification and calculations column is where you'll put what you're adding or what you're deleting or what you're decreasing or what you're increasing, and where you will include a calculation as you did when you were doing the budget clarifications. And again, this just goes over the process that I just talked over. All right, moving to advances. So advances are allowed It is my understanding that if you did want an advance request, that was required to be submitted with your application package. However, if you did not already submit one, you may also submit one with your contract package. If that is something you want to do, there is an advance payment request form that is required to be submitted. Requests cannot exceed 20% of your award. When an advance is made, we will not issue payments until you are able to show us that those advance funds have been accounted for. So basically, your monthly invoices that you will be submitting will be used to offset the advance funds that were already provided to you. And then once those are accounted for, then we will be able to continue reimbursements on the cost reimbursement as normal. If you do submit an advance request and it is approved, we will not be able to issue them until all of your startup documents have been received and confirmed. Your contracts have been signed, your budget has been approved, and your EFT form direct deposit information has been confirmed. This is that advance payment request form. Again, another exhibit in your contract package. This will be where you'll put your requesting, how much you're requesting. You're going to sign off on it. And on page 2 is where you're going to provide that justification. What expenditures from your approved budget are you requiring the advance for? And you're going to provide a justification and dollar amount that equals that total you're requesting. Once that's submitted to us, we will get it reviewed, and if approved, then once all of that documentation is provided, we'll be able to issue that advance. All right, the periodic expenditure report. Again, we call this the PER. It is the reimbursement invoice. It's noted in your contract, and we refer to it to PER. This form must be submitted with each monthly invoice, and it must include both your reimbursable and your match expenditures reported for each month. You will then upload this into Laserfish, which later on you will get a walkthrough. Laserfish is our online invoice submission portal. Once you put the invoice together, you're going to include this PER form along with all your supporting documentation into one PDF and upload it into our invoice submission portal. And Janelle's going to go over that in just a few moments. This is what the PER form looks like. Again, another exhibit in your contract package. All of these exhibits are given in Excel, and they do have formulas built in. So make sure if you're adding any additional lines in any of the budget categories that you're making sure that that formula is capturing all of the expenses and adding them correctly. With this PER form, again, you're going to fill in the top blue lines of your project, your program, and the invoice dates. In the FDRF column is where you're going to put the expenses you are requesting to receive reimbursement for. In the match column is where you're going to be putting expenditures that you are using to match the grant. Again, any expenditures and match provided on these monthly invoices must be in your approved budget to be allowable and must include the proper supporting documentation. This form must also be approved and signed off on and dated. We will accept electronic signatures, but make sure that those are included on the form when submitted. If not, we'll have to send them back, and then this will delay the review and processing of your invoice. Some important dates to remember. Say your first invoices are due to Volunteer Florida Foundation 45 days after contract execution. So right now, the grant started December 1st, so first invoices are due January 14th. This date may be different depending on when your contract is executed. After that, all invoices will be due by the 15th of each month. Extensions may be requested in writing to Volunteer Florida prior to the due date. All final invoices are due no later than 45 days after the contract is ended. So the end of the contract is November 30th, 2026. Your November invoice will be due December 15th. And then any final invoices will be due no later than that January 14th, 2027. All right, the next few slides are going to go over the supporting documentation that is required for certain types of expenditures. So if any of you have any type of personnel or salary, You are going to be required to provide timesheets that are signed and dated by the employee and supervisor, have a certification statement, and clearly note what hours are being paid for by the FDF funds. Supporting documentation for that will be payroll registers, copy of salary warrants, payroll journals, but these must note the same pay periods and pay dates and show that it has cleared your account. Personnel fringe benefits, same thing. It's going to need payroll registers noting those withholding of those payments. We're going to need an invoice from any of those fringe benefit companies noting the listing of employees and the premiums that were paid. Must also note a coverage period. And then that proof of payment. Remember, proof of payment we talked about earlier under cost reimbursement must clear the account. So regardless of whether it's a copy of a check, an ACH or EFT online, or a credit card payment, you must have that documentation as well as documentation that it has cleared your account. Travel, for those of you that may have included travel, it must have a travel reimbursement form that is signed and dated. Again, proof of payment, and same thing I said before about the credit card statement. If you're using a credit card, proof of payment is going to be the credit card statement that notes the charge, proof that the credit card statement was paid, and then proof that it cleared your account. This talks about the state of Florida per diem and mileage rates. Again, mileage for state of Florida is 0.445 cents per mile, so we cannot exceed that. You cannot get reimbursement for both mileage and gas. It would have to be one or the other. And then your per diem rates cannot exceed the $36 per day. Breakfast is $6, lunch is $11, and dinner is $19. And at the bottom of the slide, it goes over the time periods of travel that you need to travel before and beyond to be eligible for those meals. Supporting documentation for materials and products, equipment, furniture, and fixtures is all about the same. You're going to provide on the PER, you're going to list them each itemized separately and each type of supply that's being purchased. You're going to provide a detailed receipt or invoice that identifies all those items being purchased. And then, of course, again, that proof of payment. So if it's a check, it's going to be a copy of that check cleared the account. If it's a credit card, it's going to be that credit card statement, proof it was paid and that it cleared the account. Contractual costs. We're going to need a copy of the contract, and again, the same type of documentation, invoices and proof of payments, making sure that those amounts have cleared the account. Any other type of general administrative, things like rent, that were included in your approved budgets. Anytime you have a rent or a contract, making sure that you're providing with a copy of that contract or lease agreement that clearly identifies the location, the period, and the dollar amount. Any invoices and billing statements. So making sure that you're receiving those from any of the expenses and expenditures that you're paying. And then, of course, again, those proof of payments, copy of a check that has cleared your account, copy of a credit card statement, and the proof that the card was paid and cleared the account. Same thing for if it was paid ACH or online, giving us proof that that was paid and then showing that it cleared the account. All right, I know that was a lot of information in a quick period of time. I can take a few questions. If you have some, you can get them in the chat. Otherwise, we can issue and answer any of those and issue an FAQ after the fact. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janelle, and she's going to give you a walkthrough through our Laserfish portal.
We did have one question in the chat, and it was, do the calendar days include holidays and weekends?
So yes, calendar days include holidays and weekends. We will take that in account most of the time, especially if it's a holiday, that you're observing that maybe we're not observing. So just reach out to us. The main thing is communication. We set it for the 5 days. If you can get with us and let us know, hey, we're working on that, I need a couple more days, or the person, making that communication live with us will help us in making those determinations. If after 5 days we've not heard from you, I mean, that kind of gives us that, we've got to move on if we've not heard from you. So if you're having an issue or you need more time, communicate that to us ahead of time.
Awesome. Did we have any more questions for Tracy? For the justification for salary towards the project, do we submit the notes in the PER report, or do we need to submit a separate report about tasks performed as documentation?
So for salary for a staff, it's going to be that timesheet. And so depending on what, how you guys are accounting for those hours, whether it's an electronic system, you should have something built into that. If you'd like to reach out to us if you'd like to show us what you're what you're currently using to document that, to see if it would work and meet our requirements, we are happy to take a look at that for you ahead of time.
And no, I will say for the documentation purposes, for the actual time, that's how you'd want to submit it. You will also have quarterly programmatic reports that you submit to me and through Blackbaud. So that's where you would include additional information as to like what type of work you and your salary are going towards the project. Any more questions for Tracy?
All right, as always, on the last slide at the end of the presentation, I'll have contact information for Janelle and I. As always, please reach out to us ahead of time or at any time. We're always happy to assist you. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Janelle.
Hello, my name is Janelle Jones. I am the financial analyst that will be reviewing your invoice. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about Laserfish. So what is Laserfish? Laserfish is an electronic documentation system that will allow us to house all documentation electronically in one place, eliminating the need to print hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation pertaining to invoices each month, eliminating the need to store countless paper files, and eliminates the manual process. It will also allow us to electronically review all submissions and has an easier search and find functionality that will in turn allow for a quicker review and processing of invoices each month. This means that instead of us having to look through all pages in the document, we will be able to search more quickly for exactly what we are looking for. All sub-grantees who have grants with Volunteer Florida will use Laserfish to submit all monthly invoices and documentation, and will also use for all monthly invoices, communication, and further documentation requests. Okay, so this afternoon, our objectives we would like to discuss is first, know the Laserfish submission portals and web addresses, understanding how to use the invoice submission portal, and understanding how to use the invoice portal. All right, this slide gives you the web address or the original invoice submission portal. This is the portal that you will use to upload your original invoice submissions. I would suggest that you go ahead and save this website into your favorites. That way you have an easy access to it each month. Right now, I'm going to jump over to the portal and show you what it looks like. Notice at the top, it says the Volunteer Florida Sub-Grantee Portal. This, again, is the portal that you're going to use when first submit that original invoice. You'll see on here that there are red asterisks. Asterisks means that the field is required before it can be submitted. So you'll begin filling out this form. You will choose your funding source. You will do that by clicking the drop down, and you will choose which type of grant you have with Volunteer Florida. So if you're a CERT grantee or a community emergency response team, and if you're a disaster fund, you're under Florida Disaster Fund. First, choose your funding source by clicking on the drop-down arrow. For the disaster fund, you would just choose that one. Next, you will go to the PER month. Choose the PER month by clicking on the drop-down arrow, the invoice month you are submitting. And you will choose the month of the year that you are submitting. So, for instance, January 15th you will be submitting, and you're going to be submitting for December invoice. So when you choose, you'll choose December. Third, choose the PER year by clicking on the drop-down arrow 2025, 2026. Next, you will then upload your file by clicking on the upload button. Then adding file from documents, or you can click on the file and drag it into the supporting documents field. The big benefit of the system is that you can upload all of your documents into one PDF. Once uploaded, you will go down to submitter information, enter your first and last name in the field. Please note that the title is not required and you do not need to include. The email address should be the person that you want to be communicating regarding this invoice. So if you're just submitting the invoice that you want, say the administrative assistant, you say the administrative assistants to be one of that's going to be contacted about further documentation. You want to provide that email address for that person, because that person will be the person will be submitting that information to. You will then enter your phone number and then click submit. As discussed in the previous slide, this is the step-by-step PER information you should follow for the Laserfish portal on your information to be entered. And then this slide also gives you the step-by-step submitter information you should follow as well that we have explained. Once submitted, you will receive a thank you. Your form has been submitted message. You will receive an email confirmation from Laserfish, and you will need to save this to your email so that it doesn't go into your spam. The email will be coming from the Volunteer Florida at mccicloud.io web address. Those emails will come from the financial analyst that will be reviewing your submission. It will give you the month and year of the submission, and it also giving you the instant ID number. This is the number that you are going to need to keep handy, because you will need this number if you need to update your submission or provide any other documentation. What happens once we receive this? Once received this invoice, our financial analyst is going to receive a task in their inbox, letting them know that your invoice there for them to review. Please make sure that your PER form is part of the submission and is included as the first page, and all other documents behind that in the order amount you are listing on your PER form. If there is nothing wrong with the invoice, the process will be the same as normal, and the invoice will be sent to our Deputy Finance Director, who is going to process it for payment. And then it goes to our Chief Financial Officer for final review. So, what happens if the financial analyst does review your invoice and further documentation is needed? The system is then going to send you another email, and it's going to tell you that those clarifications are needed. You will have 5 business days from the date of the email to provide that information to us. If you do not receive this information, then those costs will be removed and your invoice will be processed going through the process we explained. If you have been notified that we need further clarification on your invoice, you will need to go to this portal. This is the portal that will be used for all updates to invoices and additional documentations or clarification requests. You will have to use the Instant ID. And if you look at this email, it also has your Instant ID number again, so that you have that. And also it has a link to the submission portal, so that will be your submission update portal. Again, you will see the red asterisks of the required information. You will need to start with your Instant ID number. Again, that number is in both emails. It will be in your confirmation email, and it will also be in your clarification email. You'll need to make sure that you use this number so that the documents you upload to us are attached to the correct invoice. You will receive a new instance ID number for every month that you submit. So pay attention to those emails that you receive and those requests you make sure that you use the correct instant number. And again, you'll go through and you'll choose your funding source, your PER month that you're responding to for that grant year, your organization's name, and the email address of the person that's submitting. You can upload documents the same way that you did by an order portal or either browsing and clicking, or you can also click and drag each document. Again, we are providing the step-by-step information for you to be updated into the portal. And on this slide, this is our contact information. If you had any questions, you have me and Tracy listed. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Awesome. We do have one question in the chat. If there are no expenses or match in a month, do we still submit an invoice?
No, but you reach out to us and let us know that you will not be submitting for that month.
Yeah, as Tracy said, communication is key. If you have finance questions, Tracy and Janelle are great people to contact. If you have any direct questions, you can always reach out to me as well. I can either get you a correct answer or I can give you the correct answer. Do we have any other final questions? Awesome. Hearing none. We will make the slide deck available and the recording. I will also be drafting up a couple FAQ sheets for you all, and that will include the quarterly programmatic reports as well as the monthly financial PER reports. So be on the lookout for me from those from me about those in the next couple weeks. As Tracy had said at the beginning, we are still going through a bunch of budget clarifications, so please make sure that you're staying up with their emails from either Tracy or myself for those. As soon as your budget is confirmed and approved by Tracy, you will be receiving a notification through DocuSign about your contract. So if you do have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you all for joining, and be on the lookout for this stuff in the next couple days. Thanks, everybody.